Welcome back to Real Unreal Issues, the show that examines a modern issue through the lens of an old movie. Oh boy, folks, 2020 has done it again. The recent passing of Supreme Court Justice and civil rights icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a tremendous loss none of us were ready for. But while she's resting peacefully at the end of a long, amazing life, the rest of us don't have the luxury of death. President Trump has nominated federal judge Amy Coney Barret to replace the late Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. This nomination has many LGBTQ rights groups outraged because it could lead to a reduction in their rights. Barret is a religious conservative, but the problem goes beyond that. During a 2016 lecture she gave at Jacksonville University, Barret defended the Supreme Court justices who voted against marriage equality, and she suggested the Title IX rights that allow transgender people who have equal access on college campuses should be reviewed by lawmakers. In yet another lecture, she has many, Barret misgendered transgender women, insisting on calling them physiological males. This is the woman who will have a say in the future of the LGBTQ community after they've spent years fighting for equality. Many can't help but feel like we're taking a step backwards. One day after this year's presidential election, a case in which a religious adoption agency is seeking the right to turn away same-sex couples is set to be heard. It will determine whether taxpayer-funded organizations are allowed to discriminate against gender and sexual minorities. By then, Barret will likely be on the Supreme Court. In addition to that case, the court will soon be called upon to rule on several big legal battles, such as transgender student bathroom rights, or trans women participating in women's sports. Seeing as many recent Supreme Court rulings have been decided by just one vote, Barrett's conservative voice replacing Ginsburg's liberal one bodes ill for these causes. Now, if you're like me, you're probably asking yourself, how the hell are we still having this conversation? How is it that people, let alone governing bodies, haven't decided definitively that it's wrong to limit a person's rights based on the way they were born? I don't have an answer for you. I can't begin to understand that level of ignorance. But I hope our guest this week, LGBTQ advocate Thomas Shockley, can. When I asked Thomas what film he'd like to filter this week's issue through, my mind went to amazing movies like Milk or The Boys in the Band that effectively relate the gay experience. But his pick surprised me. Let's watch a trailer.
Doesn't it ever wake you in the middle of the night? The feeling that someday they will pass that foolish law and come for you and your children. Take you all away. It does indeed.
X2, X-Men United 2003, is the sequel to X-Men 2000. Based on the comic book mutant superhero team created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1963, X2 follows the team joining forces with their arch-enemy Magneto when an anti-mutant colonel enacts a plan to eliminate all mutants. The film was a critical and financial success, a huge achievement given the queer talent in front of and behind the camera. But is it more than a well-made superhero movie? We go to the Real on Real Issues table to explore that question further. All right, we're here with Thomas Shockley. Thomas, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I gotta admit, I was a little surprised when you recommended our movie of the week, so I gotta ask you, What inspired you to pick X2, X-Men United?
Well, I've always loved comic book movies. X-Men has always been one of my favorite movie series. And I feel like the X-Men movies come from a place of people who are misunderstood. And there are many scenes in this film that kind of lend to the fact that these mutants face prejudice not too different from the LGBT community.
What plot points do you feel held real-life symbolism within them?
I think one of the kind of obvious ones is the coming out scene that Iceman has towards the middle section of the film with his parents.
We thought Bobby was going to a school for the gifted.
Bobby is the gifted.
We know that. We just didn't realize
We still love you, Bobby. It's just this mutant problem is a little
What mutant problem?
complicated.
Sir Ian McKellen was a script supervisor to that scene to make it feel as authentic as possible. Did you feel it was authentic?
I feel it was authentic for the time period, because I still feel we're at a point where not everyone's obviously still accepting of the LGBT community. And you have certain things like it's played for a laugh, but it's still a very serious line when his Iceman's mother says, "Have you ever tried not being a mutant?"
I love that line because it's so ridiculous. And
Yeah.
it's ridiculous to think that anyone would think that.
There is another point of the film that I feel represents like real life
Yeah, what's
elements. The relationship between Stryker and Wolverine, and then Stryker and his son. Because the character of William Stryker runs these programs that he tries to test on mutants, and it has a very similar feel to conversion therapy.
And I noticed this time watching the film, and I don't think it's a coincidence, when Stryker's son is forced to choose an avatar, someone to exist as in the psychic dream world, he chooses a little girl.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting connections to that because he fully embodies that character. This man has been lobotomized. He's not even that cognizant. But when projecting who he is, he's a little girl. This movie is based around Nightcrawler tries to kill the president. It's the United States government dealing to the mutant threat. And that ties around right back to the end. So I thought a fun hypothetical is, let's look at our current cabinet, our current government. How do you think they would react to the actual existence of mutants?
I think, well, knowing the president, he would have very anti-mutant sentiment. A few years ago when he held up the flag that had poorly written on it, LGBT for Trump. And then that same year, he said trans people aren't allowed to be in the military. And then, I think there would be a lot of that two-faced reaction.
What do you think soon-to-be Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barret would think?
Well, she was asked her opinion on the 2015 ruling of Oberveld v. Hodges, which allowed gay people the right to marry. And she said, I'm not going to really answer the question, but I've never discriminated against people who have a sexual preference. And then other senators kind of pressed her on that, like, why would you say such a thing? Like, these are real people. Like, this is something that's in them. It's not a choice. And to go back to X-Men, being mutant's not a choice.
Have you ever tried not being a mutant? Have you ever tried not being gay?
I've tried very hard not to be a mutant. I cannot hide the fact that I have giant crab legs. But I feel like there's a part of me that does, in certain situations, you do try to tone down. I don't want to sound like this in front of the person. I don't want to say the wrong thing and make them think, is he... there are still certain points where you have to be like, am I okay to be myself in front of these people or not?
Obvious moral answer is yes. And it's crazy to me that we're still having this conversation in regards to the current administration. So we've laid out what Justice Barret would think. Let's boil down what are some of the important lessons that we can learn from these films.
First off, not everything in life that you're predisposed with is a choice. And you look at the fact that people face these prejudice and you would think, if it was a choice, why would they choose to want to face this prejudice? They have a community, and it kind of parallels the LGBT community. And there are rifts in the community as there are in every other community. But they still are people, and they still deserve the same level of comfort, safety. That's even what Magneto wants. He wants to be able to live peacefully. Granted, his methods of attaining that peace are, not the most wholesome.
I think there's no more beautiful a note to leave it on than that. It is wrong, it is morally wrong, and we should no longer be having this conversation as a society.
I feel the conversations we should be having as a society are, how can we move past all of our prejudice to become unified people again?
Be an ally. Stand up for what you believe in. That's all any of us can do. Be an ally. Be an X-Men. That'll be it this week for Real on Real Issues. As we leave this episode in the past and march forward into an uncertain future, I urge you to remember the words of Professor Charles Xavier. This is a moment to repeat the mistakes of the past or to work together for a better future. Please, let's choose the latter. We need to be past the point as a society where we argue over who deserves equal civil rights. The answer is everyone. We need to be decent to each other. If this last year has taught us anything, it's that we need other people. If we don't speak up, no one will. People's rights are at stake. The loss of rights leads to the loss of life, and there's nothing worth more than life. So be kind to each other. Thanks for tuning in, and stay sane out there.
Scene 1, Apple take 2.